The candle flickers, and for a moment, the entire room breathes. Shadows stretch and shrink across the walls, dancing to some silent rhythm only they can hear. We sit in this half-light, watching shapes that are not quite there, not quite gone. There is something deeply unsettling about shadows. Not because they are dark, but because they are ours. They are the parts of ourselves we cannot control, the aspects that shift and change with every passing moment of light. In childhood, we feared the monster under the bed, the shape in the closet. But as adults, we learn the real monsters don't live in dark corners. They live in the corners of our minds. The flickering shadows on the wall are merely echoes of the flickering shadows within. We spend our lives running from these internal phantoms, projecting them onto others, onto circumstances, onto anything but ourselves. The colleague who irritates us for being too ambitious. Is it their ambition we dislike, or our own suppressed drive? The friend whose vulnerability makes us uncomfortable. Is it their openness that troubles us, or our own fear of being seen? Every judgment we cast outward is a shadow we refuse to acknowledge within. This is the great human paradox. We are terrified of our own darkness, yet it is precisely this darkness that holds the key to our becoming. The parts of ourselves we exile to preserve some image of goodness, of control, of acceptability. These are the very fragments that contain our deepest wisdom. Our shadows are not our enemies. They are our disowned teachers. They wait in the flickering light, patient and persistent, knowing we will eventually have to turn and face them. What if the dread we feel when shadows dance is not fear of the dark, but fear of what we might discover about ourselves in that darkness? What if the melancholy that settles after sunset is not sadness about the day ending, but grief for the parts of ourselves we left behind in the light? Carl Jung called this phenomenon the shadow, the repository of all that we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. It is not evil, though we often perceive it as such. The shadow contains our repressed desires, our unexpressed anger, our hidden vulnerabilities, our secret shames. Everything we were taught was unacceptable, everything we learned to hide to earn love and approval. Shadow projection is the psychological mechanism by which we externalize these disowned qualities. We see in others what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. The person we criticize for being too emotional might be carrying the grief we were never allowed to express. The one we judge for being too rigid might be holding the control we secretly crave. This projection creates a fundamental misalignment in our perception of reality. We walk through life seeing ghosts everywhere except in the mirror. The dread we feel is not about the external world, but about the internal landscape we have refused to explore. The melancholy that follows us is the grief of self-abandonment, the parts of ourselves we left behind in our quest to be acceptable. Self-judgment becomes the internalized voice of all the external judgments we have absorbed. We become both the judge and the accused, the jailer and the prisoner. This internal conflict creates a constant state of tension, a psychological civil war that drains our energy and distorts our perception. We believe we are fighting external battles, when in truth, we are fighting ourselves. The flickering shadows we see are merely reflections of this internal struggle. They represent the parts of ourselves that refuse to stay buried, that demand to be seen and integrated. Every time we project our shadow onto someone else, we give away a piece of our power. We become dependent on external circumstances to feel whole, when wholeness can only be found within. The setup of our psychological drama is simple. We fear what we don't understand about ourselves, and we judge what we fear. But the resolution is more complex. It requires us to turn toward the very darkness we have spent our lives avoiding. The psychology of shadow projection reveals a fascinating truth about human consciousness. We are not single, unified beings, but rather collections of competing selves, each vying for expression. The persona, the mask we present to the world, is carefully constructed to hide the shadow. But the shadow cannot be eliminated. It can only be repressed or integrated. When repressed, it finds expression through projection, through sudden outbursts, through self-sabotage, through unexplained anxieties. The flickering quality of shadows perfectly captures this dynamic. They appear and disappear, never fully present, never fully absent. Just like our disowned qualities that surface in moments of stress, in dreams, in slips of the tongue. Self-judgment emerges as the internal police force that keeps the shadow in check. Every time a shadow quality threatens to emerge, self-judgment rushes in to suppress it. I shouldn't feel this angry. I must not show this vulnerability. Good people don't have these thoughts. This internal dialogue creates a split within the psyche. Part of us wants to express, while another part condemns that expression. The energy spent maintaining this division is immense. It drains our creativity, our vitality, our capacity for authentic connection. Modern psychology understands this through the lens of cognitive dissonance and emotional regulation. We experience discomfort when our actions don't align with our self-concept. Rather than adjusting our self-concept to include our complexity, we often deny the actions or feelings that create the dissonance. Shadow work, the process of integrating our disowned parts, requires us to expand our self-concept. It asks us to become large enough to contain our contradictions, to hold both our kindness and our capacity for cruelty, our generosity and our selfishness, our courage and our fear. The flickering shadows teach us about impermanence and transformation. They show us that nothing is fixed, that everything is in motion. Our identities are not solid structures, but fluid processes. The self-judgment that feels so permanent is actually just a pattern of thought we have practiced. It can be unlearned. The dread that accompanies shadow work is the fear of disintegration. We worry that if we acknowledge our darkness, our whole sense of self will collapse. But the opposite is true. By facing our shadows, we move toward greater integration, greater wholeness. The melancholy we feel is the grief of this transformation. It is the sadness of letting go of old identities, of familiar patterns, even when they no longer serve us. This exploration is not about finding answers, but about learning to live with questions, about becoming comfortable with uncertainty, with complexity, with the ongoing dance of light and dark within. There comes a moment in every shadow journey when insight transforms into compassion, when we stop fighting our darkness and begin to understand it. The flickering shadows on the wall are no longer threatening. They become beautiful in their impermanence. They teach us about the nature of reality itself, that everything is temporary, everything is changing. Our shadows are not monsters to be defeated, but wounded parts of ourselves that need healing. The anger we project onto others is often unexpressed grief. The judgment we direct outward is frequently internalized shame. The control we exert over our environment is usually compensation for internal chaos. When we turn toward our shadows with curiosity rather than fear, something remarkable happens. The energy that was spent suppressing them becomes available for creativity, for connection, for living. We discover that our shadows contain not only our wounds, but also our gifts. The sensitivity we judged as weakness becomes our capacity for empathy. The anger we suppressed transforms into healthy boundaries. The ambition we hid becomes purposeful drive. This reflection is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. It is about learning to hold all parts of ourselves with tenderness. The flickering quality of shadows reminds us that integration is not a destination, but a process. Some days we will feel more integrated than others. Some moments the shadows will feel overwhelming. This is not failure. This is the nature of being human. The melancholy that accompanies this work is not depression, but depth. It is the richness that comes from touching the full spectrum of human experience. The dread transforms into reverence for the complexity of the human psyche. We begin to see that every quality, every emotion, every shadow has its place, that our darkness is not separate from our light, but necessary for its definition. Just as shadows give depth and dimension to physical objects, our psychological shadows give depth and dimension to our character. Without them, we would be flat, one-dimensional, lacking in substance. This reflection brings us to a place of quiet acceptance, not resignation, but deep understanding. We stop trying to eliminate our shadows and start learning to dance with them. Integration is not the absence of shadows, but the ability to hold them gently, to recognize them as part of the whole, rather than as enemies to be conquered. The flickering quality that once caused dread now brings a sense of wonder. It reminds us that we are alive, that we are changing, that we are growing. The shadows we refuse to face become our greatest teachers. They show us where we need healing, where we need growth, where we need compassion. Self-judgment softens into self-understanding. We learn to speak to ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a dear friend. The melancholy that once felt like a burden becomes a companion on the journey inward. It is the quiet space where reflection happens, where transformation takes root. We realize that wholeness is not about being without shadows, but about being in relationship with them, about learning their language, understanding their needs, honoring their wisdom. The dance of light and dark within us is not a battle to be won, but a partnership to be cultivated. Our shadows are not flaws to be fixed, but aspects to be integrated. They are the raw materials of our becoming, the unpolished gems waiting to be discovered. The flickering shadows on the wall are no longer separate from us. They are us. In all our complexity, in all our contradiction, in all our beautiful imperfection. And in this recognition, we find not perfection, but peace. Not certainty, but courage. Not an end to the journey, but a deeper way of traveling. The keys to the selves we become were never lost. They were waiting in the shadows all along,